Today, we're having a panel with three cybersecurity and IT leaders at credit unions above $1 billion in assets. I'd love to do some introductions before we get into the questions. So, first of all, my name is Taylor Wells. I am the head of marketing here at Reveal. I'll be your host and moderator today. And let's go around and do some brief introductions. Will, do you mind introducing yourself?
No, at all. Yeah, I can start. Yeah, I'm Will Reed. I'm the information security officer at Lister Hill Credit Union. I've been here since August 2004. I've been at the intersection of business and technology for about 25 years now. That's ranged between technical consultant, software systems development, business systems analyst, and a short stint as a COO at a software development company.
Thanks, Will. Kevin, mind introducing yourself?
So I'm currently a VP of Information Security at Workers. This is actually my second credit union over $1 billion, and I have about 12 years of cybersecurity and IT experience, both state, local government, defense, and now finance.
Thanks, Kevin. Brendan, finish us off.
Sure. Brendan Flanner, I'm the Chief Information Officer here at FNA. I've been with Credit Union for about 8 years, but in the IT space, oh my gosh, going on 30 years on the security side for about the last 12 or so. Yeah, I hate to kind of date myself there, but I've been around a while. But yeah, I enjoy doing this stuff, so keeps me busy.
Love it. Very cool. Thanks everyone for introducing yourself. We were just talking before we went live that we have, except for the middle of the country, we have folks in every region. We got Will's in Alabama, Kevin's in Massachusetts, Brendan's in Southern California, and I'm in Oregon. So we have every type of weather you can think of. So let's jump right into the questions here. And I'm going to start with Kevin on this question. It's going to be kind of a two-part question on the what's on all of our minds, which is AI. And kind of the first part of the question we can kind of go through is, how are you seeing AI fit or doesn't fit into your security operations? So the positives of using AI in security operations. What are your thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, so when it comes to the positive side, we'll jump on the positive side there. Being able to generate or pull in many logs, many data points, or even alerts for the teams, and then being able to use AI side by side to help kind of evaluate what they need to focus on really saves the team time and also, visibility into what's really the problem instead of false positives all the time. On the negative side, obviously, the more use of AI becomes an enterprise type of risk. So you're starting to see, individuals bringing their own AI into the mix. You're trying to allow more AI usage in different departments, but protecting that data is really the end goal there. And that job just keeps raising the bar the more we implement AI into the environment.
Thanks, Kevin. Will, any thoughts on the positives and or negatives of AI?
Yeah, we actually aren't using it yet here at our organization. We just created a policy last year. Well, when I say we're not using it, we're kind of using it for low-key stuff, but we're not really using it from an information security standpoint. But there are obviously paying attention to the space and researching the space and whatnot. And so I agree with everything that Kevin has said. And I think the thing that jumps out to me is that space that of automating things as much as possible that a human can't keep up with. That seems to be the space where I'm most paying attention to. It just seems like if you're going to argue for AI, it better be productive. And so that's what I have to add to that.
Well, Brendan, any thoughts on using AI in your organization currently?
Yeah, and we're kind of, as far as, I guess, AI adoption, probably similar to what Will was saying. I mean, we have it limited use, but on the security side, I'm finding a lot of the platforms have that AI backend into it, like our DLP solution, email protection, where they're taking advantage of what AI can offer to, learn from the behaviors of individuals and everything like that to improve how it, monitors outgoing email to go, oh, are you sure you want to send it to this address? You normally send those types of documents to this person. So those kind of areas where we've seen it enhance the tools that we already use has been definitely on the positive side. But yeah, the downside is because it's such a buzzword, because everybody seems like every, product popping up is AI and everyone gets excited about it. And from our perspective, it's okay, I don't want to get in the way of the business, but we got to keep this locked down. We have member data, we have stuff that can't get outside of the credit union, and trying to kind of rein that in and build the framework to go, okay, use it to the benefit, but also protect it is, yeah, well, we've kind of taken a little bit slower approach to make sure we can lay that foundation because, yeah, I'm very risk averse and I'm like, no, don't give everyone the ability to do this stuff. But, so that's where I kind of see the downside of it coming in house is it really can open us up to a lot more risk that we're trying to avoid.
Thanks, Brendan. Yeah, what we've observed, even just talking to other credit union security leaders, even just recently, a lot of them have been either not allowing AI in the organization, whether in the security teams or just in general. And that's been kind of the trend I've seen a lot over the last year or so. But then even just in the past couple months, I've noticed like they're kind of not necessarily being forced, but they're just the AI agents and whatnot are becoming so popular that they're having to now create either policies or create an environment and structure it and start testing things. I know like Microsoft Copilot, I've heard that, thrown around like, hey, let's start with that, right? Let's maybe allow that limited use in that organization. So it's interesting where it seems like we can't avoid it, even, not allowing it because it's so prolific, but how do we still control it and still have safeguards around it? And so I think what I'd like to kind of shift over is now looking at is AI threats. Obviously, using AI inside of our organization is one threat, and I think we're all on the same page that or at least alignment that there's lots of risks there, and we want to control that. What about just what keeps you up at night as far as AI threats in general? Whether it's increased phishing attacks or what comes to mind when you think about AI being used by the attackers? And I'll start with you again, Kevin, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no problem. I actually have a different perspective than most in the credit union world on this. So my perspective here is uh, basically it's an operational risk to not use AI. Why? The more that the kind of the bad actors are using AI, we can already see it increase in vulnerabilities are just going up and up and up and up. And if you have a team of one or two people handling vulnerabilities, they're not going to be able to handle vulnerabilities, right? There's just going to be too many coming in. And you can automate as much as you can, but again, you want to use AI to maybe help you automate that or help your team. So we need to be able to incorporate AI, maybe not as fast as the threat actors, but right behind them because we're going to be behind the curve and there's not enough of us to protect it. So we need to utilize the tools that they're using to protect ourselves. So that's my view on the overall risk. But then you have vendor risk where they're slapping AI into their products. Those products might be critical to your infrastructure. You might have a SOC report that states, you've reviewed it. Now that they added AI to it, they're not doing DR testing on their AI product, right? Or they don't even know where their DR is on that AI product because they're using either Chat GPT or Anthropics or all these different other aspects. So that's kind of my perspective there. And that's my little worry is we're not moving fast enough to incorporate it and we're going to be left behind.
Thanks, Kevin. Brendan, I'll go to you. What's your thoughts on AI risks in general?
Well, and I agree with what Kevin was saying, and that's where we're trying to find the balance of making sure we're not left behind, but kind of how do you proceed carefully? Because one of the big areas I see, and I think you touched on this a bit, Taylor, is when it comes to like phishing attacks, the use of AI to craft well-constructed business email compromise emails specific to an individual, include, whatever they post on social media is making it harder and harder to identify that stuff because gone are the days of the misspellings and the whatnot because AI has made it so much easier to do. And then when you talk about the advances in the video and audio, being able to spoof somebody's voice and their image. So one of the big things is for us is okay, how do we continue to educate and improve our awareness of people that this is going to get harder and harder to detect and we still have to be on our toes. And that's also where looking into what tools on the white hat side are taking advantage of AI to kind of combat that. Because I have a feeling at some point it's going to be your bad AI and your good AI kind of back and forth, who's got the advantage at what point. But I think the other thing that I feel we're seeing is because AI now makes it easier for someone who doesn't even know how to code anything to go, I can build this. Oh, I can do this. You also, I feel like it's a lot easier for someone to become a bad actor and go, oh, I want to develop this and send it out there, or DDoS attacks, because you have an element now that can do that for you. You don't have to have the knowledge anymore. And so that's where I feel like, you have to be so much on your toes these days because it just changes at such a rapid pace.
Brendan. Will, any other thoughts on the AI risk side or anything else that's keeping up at night?
Yeah, one thing that stood out to me or always stuck with me, and I can't remember who said this, but I thought it was really impactful to me. One of the things that they would worry about with AI is that AI is really good at analyzing whatever it is and potentially replicating it. And so this individual was saying his biggest concern is that AI could kind of slip into our systems and slowly make itself look like a typical practice. And all of our systems are looking for atypical things. And so you could have AI in your systems and not even know about it and end up with a much bigger issue because it's so good at hiding itself. I think that's always stood out to me. And that's kind of what I'm paying attention to. Can we identify that better? Can we stay on top of that more than anything?
Thanks, Will. Interesting insights. For the audience, if they have questions, I got a couple in the chat we can bring up around AI, or panelists. If you have follow-up questions for each other, feel free to jump in and we can go a little bit deeper on these different topics. A comment by Charles says the speed of attacks is going to increase 100-fold, but without AI, it's impossible to defend against them. So kind of talking about Kevin's point there. Thomas also has a question for the panel here around AI. Has anyone here implemented a private AI solution for their organization? I'm curious about their approach on-prem versus cloud, how you address data privacy, security concerns, and whether it met your business needs. So I'll open that question up to the panel. Any private AI solutions and or the audience. The audience obviously can jump into the chat too and connect with Thomas if they have any thoughts there. So I'll open up the panel. Any thoughts on the AI private solutions, or have you evaluated that or looked at that at all?
Yeah, I can jump in real quick. We've looked at an internal solution before, and we were starting with just like an internal knowledge base using AI to make it more efficient for like our telephone center people to answer questions. The problem is when it's private like that, part of how AI improves is the constant interaction with it. If you've got a limited resources to interact with it, it's really slow to learn and to build up. And the reasons why things like Claude and Gemini, ChatGPT, you have millions of interactions with it all the time. It's always learning and evolving. When it's contained within a system, there's a limited amount of interaction you're going to have. So we found it was falling far short of what we needed because we just don't have enough people to really help it learn and get up to speed quickly. And so that was one of the challenges we were finding with just having an internal system. There are some limitations there when it comes to that. And then the other aspect is if you're building anything in-house, because we're so highly regulated, you've got to have the governance in place, which means, okay, you've got to have, how do we test the model? How do we verify the logic is correct? Like it's a big undertaking to do that. And at least for us, we're not a software shop, we're a credit union. So said, yeah, we don't have the resources to spend on that. And although a couple of my IT guys want to build them, no, that's not something we're going to take on because we're not a development house. So that's where we've kind of dabbled and looked at it there as far as internally.
Fascinating. Any other thoughts from Kevin or Will on the private AI?
From the private aspect, we've been looking at it as well, but I think we're leaning towards that slow approach using Copilot right now, and I think we're on phase 2 of implementing it. So chat was the first thing we introduced to the team, and then now we're kind of dabbing in kind of the GitHub development side and some for you those other packages that they have in there, but very, very limited pilot, 1 or 2 users testing. That's kind of where we're at right now, making sure our DLP policies are working, data classifications, operational, and keeping it in that Microsoft house.
Awesome. Very cool. Well, folks, once again, throw your questions in the chat or the Q&A. We're going to kind of switch gears a little bit and move into growing your security team. So I know as obviously your credit union matures, we probably have a mix of folks on this in the audience. I know obviously some more community credit unions and then obviously larger credit unions. So curious all of your thoughts on building your security team. And so I guess kind of the first question is here, how do you build your current team structure in-house versus outsourced? Where do you draw the line? And I'll start with you.
So we are separate from the IT team. So when I'm talking about the information security team under the enterprise risk area of our organization, completely separate from the IT team. We're small right now. There's just my manager and I, but we are looking at expanding in the next year or two. And when we look at the separation between in-house versus outside vendor, the place we kind of make that break is what kind of response do we need? If we need somebody who needs to be available 24/7, that can really help us figure out, do we want to hire in-house versus a vendor? typically we lean towards a vendor on that, just because they can put together the resources more efficiently and effectively to kind of pull that off. But in-house, if it comes to governance, things that are day-to-day operational, making sure the pieces we put in place are going the way they should be going, that policies and procedures are being followed correctly or adjusted as needed and growing, that those kind of things we would bring in-house. That's when we would typically hire for a role like that.
Cool. Thanks, Will. Kevin, your thoughts on your team structure?
Yeah. So I've actually been part of two different structures. So I think when I started in the finance, my first credit union over $1 billion, they had InfoSec under IT. Didn't really work in that aspect because you want that oversight, and you found yourself kind of doing more controls in that aspect and doing more IT tasks. So at Workers, they do separate it very similar to Will, where InfoSec is completely separate from the IT operations, but then building that team around there is I support the IT team as if I was part of their team. And when it comes to that is making sure they have the right skills and they understand security and what they're implementing and testing controls. So there's a lot of oversight in that. We do quarterly kind of reviews. So it's like I'm part of their team, but I am my own team there. And my team here right now at Workers is smaller, but I had bigger teams of 8 or 10 individuals at other organizations where it's nice to be able to reach out and have that hand in the IT aspect. But right now, I believe that InfoSec should be under that risk profile and have that oversight and just work side by side with IT from my perspective.
Any thoughts, Kevin, just real quick on the in-house versus outsourced, like as far as like how you grow your teams or from there?
So again, when it comes to controls and looking at the day-to-day operations and making sure that nothing is kind of slipping through the cracks, you got to want an in-house team. But again, when you're looking at like SIEM providers, and SOC, and 24/7 services and alerting, you got to want that extra resources to reaching out there.
Very cool. Thanks, Kevin. Brendan, your thoughts on team structures and all that fun
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah, similar to both what Will and Kevin were saying as far as the outsourcing piece of it. So we have a small team here, and the CEO and I have tried to take the approach of augmenting through third parties because one, it tends to be a lot more cost effective than hiring individuals. I don't know about the other ones, but certainly here in California, and it's a very litigious place. And so there's a lot more involved when you hire full-time employees as opposed to a third-party service. But they have resources like we use an MSSP for all of our 24/7 monitoring because we don't have a staff that can watch this 24/7. They can collect all the data in the SIM. They have the analysts to look through it. But what we did was, because internally, we still want to be we didn't want them to take any actions because they don't know our business and we don't want to disrupt business service if they go, well, we saw this, so we shut it down and now our members can't access their accounts. So we took a phased approach. We've been with them now. This is our 3rd year where we basically started with just monitoring and notifying us if you see something. And it is the internal team that would then review if there was something that needed to happen. And kind of as they've learned our systems, we've started to move certain things over where they can actually take action. So we've got certain criteria that if this is met and it's a definite indicator of compromise and these things are there, you can go ahead and take that action because obviously 2, 3 in the morning, we don't want to wait till 7 or 8 when someone comes on site and that's now been out there. We want them to be able to take that device offline or whatever. But when it comes to our core platform, servers, things like that, it's still, no, we want to ultimately have the control of that because, again, we don't want to disrupt the business. So we've kind of tried to find a balance where we get the advantage of the resources they can throw at it, but the control still kind of remains internal to us so that we're still making sure what's happening is in line with not just safe, but not overly affecting the business in a negative manner. So that's kind of the approach that we've taken is where can we utilize it and basically augment what our internal teams can do, giving them more tools to do more with less, I guess.
Fantastic. Awesome. Great. Thanks for all your insights. Great. Let's move on to kind of our next area, which is a topic near and dear to Reveal's heart and what we focus on, which is getting buy-in with executives and board members. So this topic is a big one, and I think we can obviously break it out into different areas. But I think in general, we can like to kind of start with the question is, how do you communicate cyber risk without scare tactics and really getting that buy-in maybe with your peers at the executive level or in your board? And maybe those are separate, right? Maybe how you communicate to your executives is different than your board, but I'd like to talk about kind of how do you communicate risk and get buy-in? And I'll start with you, Will.
You ask, is it possible to do without scare tactics? Sometimes I think, no, it's not. Sometimes I look at this stuff and I'm
It's too
scared.
scary.
It is scary. But when I communicate, I try to be pretty matter of fact. And I also try to share what's happening out in the world, even if it doesn't affect us. So our board is still growing their experience around information security. And so when I say I share things that don't affect us, it's to kind of set that tone that these things are happening out there. And so that if something like that does happen with us, um, they'll be more prepared, I think, to take it more seriously and not be as scared, but also be more trusting of what I'm saying. So I'm kind of playing that long game. Thankfully, we haven't run into anything yet that's been so scary that I've had to be extremely serious about the situation. Using that approach, I feel like it's working. I feel like every time I have a committee meeting, a board committee meeting, and we're talking about what's happening in the news and explaining what we would do or what we have in place to protect against what you might see happening elsewhere. I think that goes a long way to helping them understand the situation, but also not see it as a scary thing when it comes up. More of a, hey, we know what we're doing, or we know how to get help when we need it. So yeah, that's how I've been approaching it.
Well, I'm just curious, are you talking, like when you use examples, are you using specific like financial institution situations? Or are you talking about Iran's attack on, Stryker, or like specific, like more like headline scenarios and
Yeah.
talking through those scenarios?
All of the above. Sometimes
Okay.
it's something they probably wouldn't have heard about. Some more technical folks would be paying attention to, but I already have that Striker one on my list for next quarter to talk to them about it because that's pretty significant. I mean, what it did. So I've already talked to my IT team and my manager, and we wanted to put together a list of all the controls we have in place that would hopefully have prevented something like that. And so, yeah, that's just a great example of something I'm going to touch on with them that we're not affected, but you should know what's happening and why.
Thanks, Will. Kevin, your thoughts on communicating risk to the board or your executive team?
Yeah. So I agree. I don't try to lead with fear. My perspective is likelihood, impact, and readiness. So really just kind of laying it out simpler to them. It's like, here's the chances of it happening, and then what's the impact to the businesses. I usually do try to break it down individually to who my audience is. So I will, if it's Stryker is a good example, I'll have a different conversation with the CIO. I'll have a different conversation with marketing. I'll have a different conversation with the CEO or CRO. Each one has kind of a custom interaction with me, so they understand the impact that will impact their side and their members, and then also their staff if something did happen. But also understanding that we normally don't want to do nothing about it, but we want to do something. So just not sitting and waiting and being more proactive. But that's kind of my perspective there.
And then any thoughts there on
Um,
communicating?
I mean, similar to what the other two talked about, part of it is just it's a different conversation based on who I'm talking to. But the fact is, to what Will said, I don't need scare tactics because they usually come in going, "Oh my gosh, I read about this," and they're already panicked. So I don't need to provide anything. But what I do try to do is kind of what Kim was, give them perspective and say, look, okay, but let's look at it from our perspective and the likelihood of it. And really, I try to make sure that I'm providing data and facts behind, okay, what could we really be affected by? I mean, certainly there's enough going on. And I think everyone's familiar with what happened with Patelco last year. Examples like that, where I can take that and say, okay, here's what happened here. Here's what we have in place. These are the things that we do to protect ourselves against possible things like that. So I try to take examples when they're out there to kind of reassure them, these are the controls we have in place. This is why we're doing X, Y, and Z, or why we, spend money in this area is to protect for these things. So try to find ways to use that to just support our position when it comes to our needs and how we want to protect everything, and try and give them and make it a dollar amount. Like, okay, what kind of real risk are we talking about? What would this cost the credit union if this were to happen? Because, I know at least for our board, there is a bottom line of, okay, what does this all mean cost wise? What does it mean to the members? So I always try to put in those terms as well.
Thanks, Brendan. I love that. Actually, and that kind of ties perfectly into my follow-up question, which is around metrics and reporting formats, like that you report to the board, and what does your kind of board format look like? And so, Brendan, I'd love to go a little bit deeper. First, you said quantifying it, quantifying the risk. Like, how do you do that? Number one, what's your guys' process internally? And then number two, what other things do you include in that board metrics? What other things outside of dollar risk?
I mean, I will try and take any data as far as when we, and I'll usually pull from like when we do our risk assessments and everything, the likelihood, what is our exposure in these areas, especially um, if there's been a breach or something, or it's related to third party, is okay, we'll then talk about and we'll show what we do in regards to, say, our third party vendor management process, and how we go through that due diligence to show, to make sure we're checking these things. I try to keep it, and it's not because any of our board members are not intelligent, but I try to keep it straightforward and simple, because you can go down rabbit holes, and really, I try to give them a big picture of, here's kind of what we're looking at. This is our threat. This is how we can kind of keep it down. I'll back it up with data that's out there supplied by, there's so many reports that get generated annually on all this information. Or even when we're talking about just like our phishing training and our testing, compare that to, okay, what's an industry standard for this? Or, are we in line with that? Are we doing better? When we look at like our incident response, the tickets that get generated from our MSSP, what's our response time? So I try to keep things that to them, they can quickly go, okay, good. I kind of get what we're doing. But really try to keep it at as high a level as possible, especially when, I know for most of us tech guys, we can go right into it and people just glaze over and go, oh, yeah, you don't know what I'm talking about, do you? So that's one thing I always try to keep it, as high level as possible, just to get the point across. That's my approach.
Love it, Brendan. Thank you. Will, what's your thoughts on board reporting, and what do you report to the board?
Yeah, I would second everything he said. The one thing that I always try to do with my approach to is information security for me has always been one of, it's constant. It's always happening. And so how are we sure that we're doing the things we need to be doing day in and day out? And so to add to the only one thing I would add to what he said was that idea of showing the board, this is what we committed to doing, and this is what we've been doing, and here are the new things we're doing because of X, Y, and Z. Something's changed, or maybe we're stopped doing this because it's no longer effective. I feel like that is one of those areas where it has been really helpful to communicate to them, just so they can really have a sense that we are staying on top of it because it is so constant and happening all the time. So yeah, that's other than that, I'd add.
Kevin, board reporting, what are your thoughts?
And again, I'm going to second everything they said, but I'll give a little bit of a twist because coming in as a cybersecurity engineer, more engineer hands-on, and jumping into my role here, I struggled to get my head out of the weeds and give them exactly what they want to see. But overall, what I found out was that you want to give the past, present, and future, right? You want to give the future risks that you see coming down, or the future things, projects, but you also want to give a current metric, and then where did we start at the beginning of the year, showing them that we're going in the right direction, or maybe we're struggling in an area. We may need more resources. So once I figured that out, it was a lot smoother.
Very cool. Very cool. Once again, folks, I know we got a couple more questions in the chat, which we'll add to the agenda here. But if you have any other questions, throw them in the Q&A or the chat. Let's move on to another big topic, which is preparing for exams and audits. So let's talk about exams. And just curious, has anything, I guess, maybe when was your last exam with NCUA? How have things changed over either your last exam versus the one before that? Maybe it was in 2025 and you had one in 2024, or maybe you had one already this year and you had one in 2025. So just curious, what have you seen change between your most recent exam and the one previous? And I'll start with you, Brendan.
Well, that's good. They just left a few weeks ago.
Oh, cool.
They come out at the beginning of the year, normally in January, but they gave us a break and came out the first week of February. Yeah, we just had the NCUA out. It's interesting because, well, one, I feel like we're always in the middle of audits all throughout the year. So I don't feel like there's ever a time where you're not having one. And because security and IT is always lumped in, doesn't matter if it's BSA, whatever. So we're always going through it. But, what I found, at least in our experience with them when they were just out here, big things that they're focusing on are third party due diligence. They're realizing, what are you doing to really understand what your third parties are doing and how are you protecting against that? That's been a big focus. Obviously, AI policy and governance. Okay, first it was, do you even have a policy? What are you doing about this? How are you doing it? That was a big focus for them. And then around security awareness and training to, show us, what are you doing regularly? I think gone are the days where you can go, oh, here's our annual test that we do. They want to see, no, what are you doing on a regular basis? And how are you communicating this to the board? Are you doing that on a regular basis? That's where, at least on the IT side, we saw a big focus from them this year, which I know a few years ago, it was very much focused around controls around the core, and that's still there. But I think they're starting to shift and see, oh, these are the trends in the industry, and we better start paying attention to this and making sure the credit unions are. And they're kind of starting to catch up to that now, I think.
Will, any thoughts on NCUA exams?
Yeah. It's going to become a thing. But yes, everything he said, yes. And then AI governance has definitely been a thing that was outside the ordinary in our last one that they started asking about. But just to stay prepared for those, I'm with him. The idea that if you're doing this stuff on a week in and week out basis, I feel like our team is already prepared. So even if they come in an exam and they ask for some stuff that we weren't prepared for, I feel like we're 90% of the way there. Being prepared for these things is just a daily process. I would say systematic. Build the system around it, capture the stuff you're doing, capture the evidence you're doing, be able to explain it all. You want to do that anyway for any of your leaders, for the board. And so that's been our approach. Just be preparing for an audit, an exam all the time. We have a third party come in and audit us once a year. We're preparing for that. We have the exam. We're preparing for that. We're just preparing to be able to explain what we do and why we do it all the time.
Awesome. Thank you both. Kevin, thoughts on NCUA exams and any changes?
Yeah, so we actually have ours in April. So we haven't had the newest one, but the last one was a big focus on like incident response, BCP, DR testing, some firewall, SSL, whitelisting. Those were kind of the target areas that we had. But going in now, having some insight from these two, we are ready with AI. And again, I can go, Will, I think how you explained that was perfect. If you just prepare yourself like you're going to have an audit every day, you're ready. It just makes your life easier. If you're collecting the evidence, it just makes it easier. They come in, you give it, and they're gone. So
love that. Well, it's actually a second part of our question. How do you stay exam ready year round or audit ready, which I'd love to tackle in a second. But before that, Michael had a follow-up question on the NCUA around AI. And he asked a question around the NCUA regarding how your vendors are using AI. If so, are they requiring you, the NCUA, requiring you to document their use within each vendor's profile within your vendor risk management program? Has the NCUA brought that up as far as vendors AI?
I can add to that. I don't think they asked us to do that, but we are doing that. We added that pretty early on. Once we realized that it could so easily be added to any application, we realized, we need to have something that includes that as part of the vendor management program. Just simply saying, all right, business owner, you're bringing this software to us. What's your understanding of their use of AI? Obviously, we want to get all the other documentation around it as well, but we need to make sure the business owner understands the purpose of AI or the existence of AI in there and how they might use it. So that's what I can add to that. We in our vendor management program, I can't remember if we were asked about that, but we definitely have it in there.
Yeah, I would say similar to what Will said, they did not ask specifically about it, but we give them access to the vendor management system to look through. It's data we collect. So they may have been looking for it, but they didn't specifically call it out or anything. Yeah.
Awesome. Deborah asked, did all of you have a Rizzo visit during your NCUA recent audit? We have one coming on Monday.
We did not. We've had them previous years. This year we did not. And I don't know if that's because of cuts to the NCUA, but yeah, we did not have them out.
I've been here. I've been with Lister Hill for a couple of years. We haven't had one since I've been here.
Cool. I actually am just curious, what's your perception? This is my own personal question. Sorry for going off the agenda a little bit. What's your perception are the exams getting harder, easier? Or is there any thoughts on, just like with the cuts, like we mentioning Brendan with the cuts, any observations? Feel free to pass on the question too, if you don't want to comment.
I don't want to get myself in trouble if I say the wrong thing. It's interesting. I do think the cuts are affecting them. I will say, I think this, there was I think there was an experience gap in some of the examiners we saw this year. I think they're having to have younger people step in Like I said, we didn't have a Rizzo this year. We've always had an IT specialist come in on that. We didn't. So I don't know that it's easier or more difficult, because sometimes you have questions that you have to answer that you go, well, okay, let me explain this to you,
Yeah,
because the experience isn't there. So, but yeah, I did see a difference in the experience this year versus previous years.
Any other thoughts on that, Will or Kevin? Cool. Yeah. Thanks for your insights there. And then moving on to our second part of the question of preparing how do you stay audit ready, exam ready? I heard that from all of you. What are the systems, the processes? How do you organize your teams? What's the culture you create? All the above. Any thoughts there? And I'll start with Kevin. Any thoughts on how you stay audit ready?
Yeah, so we have a kind of a bigger IT spread of individuals. I think there's like 30 across the organization. So when we have an audit, we assign one individual, one leader per area, and then they all meet in the meetings. They all collect the documentation from their teams, but it's very systematic. And then we do a QA. Me and the SVP of innovation will do a QA before submitting up to NCUA. It's a very streamlined process, but I think it gets easier as you do it.
Will, any thoughts? Thanks, Kevin. Will, any thoughts on
Yeah,
being audit ready?
I think I'm really thankful that our VP of network administration, because that's most where the effort is on that team and my team, and there's some effort obviously elsewhere in the organization, but it's smaller. But I'm thankful because he takes it very seriously, and so he's aligned with me to be doing it throughout the year. We don't want, for even if you think of our annual IT audit where we hire an outside vendor, we don't want to get to that point a month before and scrambling and trying to pull all that together. That can be so stressful that month, just trying to gather all that stuff up when we know we've been doing it and we just need to collect it throughout the year. So if you can partner, especially with those leaders who are doing that heavy lifting for this stuff, and they might be more open to, as my leaders have shown, to collecting it throughout the year instead of waiting until the last minute. So this is something that I put out there. Invite them to maybe participate throughout the year, and they might. Thank you.
Brendan, any additional thoughts on?
The only other thing I would add is, I know I will usually sit down with our chief risk officer and go over the schedule for the year. When are your audits? What's going on? So that we can kind of schedule them in a way where, okay, well, great. Documentation we collect for this one, you could turn around and use for this audit, because it's going to be the same data and everything. So we will try to see where we can maybe coordinate that, because obviously, we don't want documentation fatigue. Like, oh my gosh, didn't we just have to go pull all this for this other one? So we will try and get together early on and just be a little strategic about it to kind of reduce some of that overhead for everybody. But, to Will's point, I've always taken the approach of, ultimately the idea of these audits is to look and see where we may be falling short in our controls. So if we're just always making sure we're doing the right things, it's just a matter of, okay, well, what data do you want us to pull right now? It's not, it's not a huge lift. So yeah.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that. We got about 15 minutes left. So folks, if you have questions, throw them in the chat or ask in the Q&A section. We got a couple more sections here. We're going to wrap this up. Our next section is around, this is actually kind of ties in with AI a bit, but I know digital transformation is obviously a priority, especially for community credit unions, and has been kind of one of the top areas of focus, I know, in a lot of credit unions over the past couple of years. I'm curious, managing cybersecurity risk as digital transformation accelerates, as more folks want to, more members want to use digital services. I'm curious how, any observations over the last couple of years, or how have you worked with IT to make sure you have that sweet balance between, and customer member experience. So Kevin, I'll start with you. Any thoughts on kind of digital transformation as a whole?
Yep. What I'm starting to realize is, I believe members are realizing that security is something that they need to have on their side. So we're getting a little bit less pushback of, adding an MFA. I know passkeys is something that we want to push towards eventually, when we can figure out how to make that easier for members. But working side by side on that and finding that balance and really listening to your members, but keep evolving and keep encouraging them, keep educating your members so that they can do the best of their security. Because if they get compromised, it impacts fraud, it impacts the credit union loss there. So it's really encouraging both the teams, but also members to adopt new new strategies with us.
It's encouraging given that members are more open to it. It's very cool. Will, any thoughts on digital transformation, acceleration, all that fun stuff?
Yeah. Well, again, I love what Kevin has already touched on, but I was actually discussing this presentation with my manager before I came in here, and I thought this was because just a little inside baseball. You sent us these questions ahead of time, so I was looking at this one, and I shared this with him, and I thought, what would you say to this? And his reaction was like, he didn't feel like there were a lot of risk digital. He felt like we're starting to see more of the analog threats come back. That we're so much focused on the digital side, the digital risks, the digital threats, that we're starting to see check fraud and counterfeit and smash and grab, just trying to tear out an ATM and get into it. So I wanted to add that back into the conversation. I know that's not a digital aspect of it, but because he shared that, I thought it would be helpful to share here. So even if you're digitizing, just remember not to think those bad guys aren't going to go try to do all those analog stuff.
Fascinating. Thanks for bringing that up. Brendan.
Well, we had a different approach in that I was before the CIO, I was our CISO, but I was also our chief digital transformation officer. So I got to oversee the digital transfer. So it all came from a security perspective. So that's a bit of a cheat, I guess, in that I was already coming from that as we approached it. But I think, the benefit there is our CEO understands, and I think this is a big thing when even tying back to the board, if you can get tie-in at the top level of how important it is, it makes everything else so much easier. So when you're approaching digital transformation or whatever, and they already know we have to approach this in a smart way. We have to be secure about it. That goes a long way to making sure those checks are in place as you're switching to more digital away from things. We went through a whole mobile conversion a couple of years ago and then a core conversion and moving everything to the cloud. And, it opens up your attack surface. So you've got to be conscious of it wasn't all, before when it was all self-contained in our servers and it was very limited access, that was a lot easier to protect. Now, as we add third parties and other connectors in, every time we do that, we're expanding the attack surface. And so it's just taking, in my mind, a bit of a security approach to it while understanding the business still has to run and security can't get in the way of the business. If we kind of approach it from that aspect, so far we've been able to find a pretty good balance. And kind of to Kevin's thing with members, I got to tell you, it also depends on, we have a lot of older members. They do not like the change. Wait, what? More than 8 characters for a password? MFA? No, that's too difficult. I can't remember that. That's been a big challenge, is getting them comfortable with this stuff. And sometimes you just have to go, you know what? It's for your own good. Because if something happens, you're going to be on the phone to us right away going, hey, how come you didn't protect this? We go, well, you gave them the information. We can't do much about that. So that's a big thing there too, is also just kind of educating the members and getting them more comfortable with the world that we live in. And we got to lock it down for your own good.
Love that. I love that. Yeah, providing some leadership in that area. And my mother is in her mid 70s, and the attacks she gets, I think she's actually gotten much more open to cybersecurity because the attacks she gets, it's crazy. Not only the sophistication, but also the amount of it. It's wild how senior citizens are targeted. Let's wrap it up with this last section: risk assessments and management. I know we got a couple questions in the chat I'd like to get to before we wrap up, but our last section here: risk assessments and management. What's your process to risk assessments, and are there any ways you've found that have made any process improvements that have made a difference? So, Kevin, we'll start with you.
Yeah. So one of the biggest processes that we added is the self-identified process, where we allow any department to kind of write up a gap that they see on their side. It could be security, but it could also be one of their processes. It could be a compliance issue, and having a kind of fix to remediations. They'll have meetings either monthly, quarterly, until they resolve that issue or fix that gap there. That's helped also kind of translate into the overall risk assessments, because now we're getting more reporting of, hey, we have this risk, and then we can document it, and we have plans, and maybe it's a 2-year plan, maybe it's a 3-year plan, but we have it on paper. Auditors seem to like that as well, because we're thinking forward, and we're also kind of showing what gaps we have before they even come on board. So that's kind of my high level of it.
Will. risk assessments?
Yeah, I'm going to steal Kevin's idea. That's a good one. But I'll follow up with you later about that, Kevin. But one of the things we've been trying to pay attention to is there may be areas where there's not a lot of change. And so, as the guys have hit on, you don't want to stand in the way of business. And so we don't want to be doing risk assessments just for the sake of doing a risk assessment. And so we are looking at doing a criticality 3-year rotation. If it's really low on the criticality level, we'll probably not touch it every year unless someone raises a red flag to us. So we'll reach out to them every year and say, anything changed? Obviously, that's an oversimplification, but you get the point, and have that short conversation before we decide to move forward, saving everybody the time and effort. But the more critical it is, the more we're going to touch it. So yeah, that's what we've been trying to focus on.
Brendan, thoughts
Yeah,
on risk
I
management?
would say similar to what Will was just saying. We kind of a couple years ago did an assessment of, okay, how often do we need to do these risk assessments in the other areas? And obviously there are ones where we need to do every year. It's just that critical, but other ones it's every 3 years, to kind of redo some of that. I do love your idea, Will. I want to steal it too, but I have a question. How do you get them to do that? Because getting a different department to on their own go, well, hey, look, this is a gap. This is a risk. Like, I'm usually having to get them to try and identify that stuff. I'm really curious how you get them to actually initiate that kind of
So
stuff.
I think
It's
I'm
awesome.
gonna go back and I'm gonna steal Kevin's idea to help. Now make sure I'm doing it well enough. But it feels like I feel like the team before I got here, I feel like the organization was already doing pretty well at communicating how information security is not me and my department and my manager. It's throughout the entire organization, and that's part of our employee onboarding process. And I give that training to every new employee, and I emphasize that. I think that's made a difference. I'm not saying everyone's perfect and not always going to be thinking about information security, but I think that has helped. So, but I'm still going to go steal Kevin's idea. So,
Kevin, did you have any additional thoughts or?
Yeah, other people are going to have questions there too. But I'm going to kind of take what happened with football and the Patriots, and it comes down to a culture. It really comes down to culture. If it doesn't matter if you have A team, C team, if you don't think you have all the best players on the field, if you can have that culture where everyone's taking security the same way that you are, training them. There's individuals in my, different departments in mortgage, or that know security just as well as I am, or telling me the news before I'm telling them the news. Just kind of encouraging them and rewarding them. Having competitions between departments is one of my things that I like to do on security. So, but once you have that, you tend to have people open up and let you know what's going on.
Well, Kevin, maybe we need to do a master class on culture, because I think that could be a follow-up we could talk about. Super cool. We have a couple minutes left. We have 2 questions I want to hit at in the chat. First one is from Gregory. What are your views on developing and using AI agents? Back to our original conversation, what are your thoughts on the agentic movement from generative? Any thoughts there? Developing using AI agents? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. So we're actually right in the cusp of looking at that and seeing the risk and seeing how it's going to be beneficial to the organization. And what we're realizing is when you start going agentic, look at that agentic, everyone that's created as an individual person. You're going to want to protect it like an individual person. You're going to want to monitor it. You're going to want to put all the same rules and controls that you do with an individual. So if you have a 300-person organization, you add 300 agents, you now have a 600-person organization. You have to treat it that way with your controls. And we're starting to test that out, and that seems to be the way to look at. But again, like a person, they got to find workarounds. Like an agent, they got to find workarounds. So you got to really want to make sure you have that visibility there as we push forward. Still a lot of unknowns, but that's what we're seeing so far.
Any other thoughts from the panel on that topic?
No, I agree with Kevin on that. Yeah, because when you're talking agentic, it does its thing, so you better be keeping an eye on it. Yeah.
Cool. Very cool. Well, the last question, and then we'll wrap up here, is especially as a credit union, change will be challenging for our members or shareholders, aka bosses. How do we manage this as a part of risk management? Any thoughts from the panel?
I'm going to go back to culture, and that we live in a world that things are changing faster than they did 10 years ago. Ever since I've been in the field, it's been moving, but I feel like in the last 5 years, it's moving even quicker. And if you don't accept it, you are going to be left behind. But if you have the culture behind it to accept change, even if it's not a lot of change, but it's some change over time, I think you're moving in the right direction. It doesn't have to be everything at once. Small baby steps can work too.
Very cool.
I think just to add to that also, we always try to remind them we're member centric. So these changes are really, and help them, they're for your benefit. It's not to make things more difficult. It's not to, we know change is not comfortable, but it really is in their best interest. In that's, we're always approaching it from what is best for the members. So.
I love that. Well, very cool. I know we're about up on time here, and thank you all for joining us today. I know we didn't get to all the questions in the chat. I know, Jessica, you have a question about merge and whatnot, which we're up on time, so we won't be able to get to. But I imagine any one of the panelists would be free to, if you want to reach out to them directly on LinkedIn, they can speak to any of those questions. And yeah, once again, thanks everyone for joining us today. Thank you, panel. I learned a lot. So super fun, super interesting. We'll send out the recording afterwards, and hope everyone is healthy and safe. Thanks again, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.